Welcome to Casual Friday. So I've got a quick announcement. I'm going to do an unboxing of something that was kind of a surprise package to me. And then the main portion of this video is a little different than anything I've done before. It's something I've been wanting to do, but until the past couple of weeks, I just hadn't made it happen, and then just things fell into place that made it work out. So let's get started. The first thing is just an announcement about another knitting article that I have out. This is Interweave Knits Gifts 2019. And I have this article that's shown on the front, Make Up a Hat with Your Stash. So it's an article. There are a lot of hat patterns in this particular issue because those tend to be great holiday gifts. But my article tells you how to just take a skein of yarn from your stash, do some swatching to figure out what your gauge is, and then how to do the calculations to figure out your cast on number, how to proportion the ribbing with the main body of the hat, and then how to figure out how to do the crown decreases. So there's examples in the article. Two of the editors from Interweave took a skein of yarn from their stash. One took a worsted weight, one took a bulky weight, and the hat sizes were slightly different for each one, but they're modeled on the same person. So you can see how a hat fit can be a determination for how big you make your hat as well. So that's currently available for digital download from the Interweave website starting Thursday, September 12th. And then in a couple of weeks, the print copies will be out in stores, and I assume subscribers will be getting their copies soon if they haven't already. Now, typically, sometime after the magazine comes out, my articles will appear on the Interweave blog. I assume that will happen for this, but I don't have any information yet. So I always have links to every article I've written for Interweave in my Ravelry group, and I'll leave a link down below to where you can find links to all of my articles. So a couple of weeks ago, I got a message on Ravelry from someone who curates a monthly subscription box, a fiber subscription box, and he works for Paradise Fibers. And that company name rang a bell with me. But he said that they have this monthly fiber subscription box, and the September theme was mittens, and that they were sending fiber for the people to spin into yarn, and then they were including mitten patterns and some poly fleece that could be used to line the mittens. And he had been researching, well, what is the best way to line mittens with fleece? Like, how do you do that? And he came across my YouTube video on this topic, which I'll link to up there, and said, we'd love it if we could include a link to your video for our subscribers, and as a thank you, we'll send you the monthly subscription box. Well, I said, of course you can link to my video. It's a public video. I love hearing when people refer other people to my videos. I love hearing about that, but I didn't think it was necessary to send me a subscription box. So I just said, oh, it's fine. You can link it. Thanks for letting me know. And then he responded back, okay, but what's your address? So I gave it to him. And I honestly, I just forgot about it. And because I don't even remember things I deliberately order myself. It's like Christmas when the doorbell rings and there's a package. I'm like, ooh, what did I order? So I heard a knock on the door, and I thought it was something I had ordered, a book that I had ordered from overseas, and I thought maybe I'd have to sign for it. I'd forgotten that I'd already received that book. So I got down there, and there was a package. This package was sitting on my front doorstep. And then I saw the sticker, and I went, oh, okay, I know what this is. So I started to open it up, and then I saw it was really nicely packaged inside, and I thought maybe you guys would like to see this, because I have never subscribe to anything like this. I looked it up online to see what it even was. It's I think it's a $34.99 a month, and then you don't have to subscribe for a year or anything. You can do it just for a month or 2 months or however. You can cancel it whenever you want. So I thought I'd let you know what's in here, because I had never seen one of these. Now, Paradise Fibers is a company that it rang a bell with me, because when I took my very first spinning class, my beginning spinning teacher, that's where she bought the fiber for the class. So whenever you take a spinning class, they give you so much fiber. You pay a fee on top of the class fee, you pay a fee for the materials that you pay to the instructor, and then you get all this fiber that's going to last you for the whole class plus enough to take home. So I remember looking up their website when I first was taking spinning classes, but pretty soon I thought, oh, you know, I really want to start with the raw fleece and clean it and see the crimp. And I just kind of realized pretty early on that I wanted to start from the sheep and go forward. And because every spinning class I've taken, they've provided us with fiber, I have so much commercially prepared fiber. I haven't needed to order any. So I'd kind of forgotten about Paradise Fibers, but I remembered once I was told. There's this little sheet that's in here, and I know the fiber is blue-faced Leicester, which is usually called BFL. And so there's information about Leicester and the sheep itself and the characteristics of it. So there's a whole 2-page thing here, and it says what's in the box: 4 ounces natural ecru, blue-faced Leicester, and Tussa silk blend. 4 ounces natural white and brown blue-faced Leicester mix. 2 swatches of poly fleece fabric. 1 autumnal sash tee non-GMO. 1 limited edition vinyl sheep sticker. And non-international boxes are scented with purely pumpkin, a luxurious simmering potpourri. And then they've got some other information. And then they've got this fall featured artist, which I see my face is on the back. So it isn't really a link to that video. It's information about me. And then telling about my Ravelry group and my YouTube video, but that I have a video about lining with fleece. And then there's 2 mitten patterns in there as well. So that's nice. There's a burlap bag in here and a lot of little pretend fall leaves in here. Okay, and then there's tissue paper in here. I still can't see what's in here. And, oh, that must be the potpourri that just spilled out. So they did not ask me to mention that they were sending this to you or ask me to show it to you. Oh, there's a bunch of little, like, stickers in here. Different stickers, sheep stickers. And there's a little pin with a sheep on it. And I don't know what this is. Oh, this is a thank you note. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you for your contributions to this month's Fiber Club box. We love your work and would be honored to feature you again in the future. If you have any ideas for collaborations and future boxes, just reach out to us. Thank you again. Happy spinning. The Paradise Fibers family. Well, that's very nice. Let's see. Oh, this potpourri is coming all over the place. Okay, so there's a little tea bag. And then we've got these 2, okay, so this is very nicely packaged. Like I'm the kind of person who would be like, oh, here's your stuff, and I jam it in a box. I wouldn't even think about presentation. So there's a very nice plum color fleece in here. And this is like a little project bag, but the fleece comes in. That's very nice. So, and so it's like two balls of roving. Oh, this is really nice. And I like this. I was thinking it was, I don't know why I thought it was going to be, it's like a tonal or like a, oh, this is really cool. So this is kind of fun because I'm always trying to figure out, well, I don't even know what to make if I spin some yarn. So now I have a project that I can actually turn into something. So that could be really fun for me. So thank you, Paradise Fibers. I'll put a link down to their website and you can check it out. You know, I've only heard good things about them from people who order fiber online because they carry a lot of different things. So that's that. Back in April of 2015, I went to a knitting retreat out in Port Ludlow, Washington. Port Ludlow is it the Olympic or Olympia Peninsula? Olympic sounds right to me, but it might be the Olympia Peninsula of Washington. So when you fly into Washington, you go into Seattle, but then if you want to get to this peninsula, you either have to take a ferry or a seaplane, or you have to drive all the way around, and then you can go back up again. So I signed up for this retreat. It was a 3-day retreat, and these retreats happen 3 times a year. And these are the retreats that Stephanie Pearl McPhee does, the Yarn Harlot. I assume she still does them. Up until that point, there was each of the 3 days, there was usually knitting, and then there was a day where there was spinning, and then the third day might be more knitting, or it could be cooking, or it could be something else. So she put together these retreats with 3 teachers, and then the teacher would teach that same class all 3 days, and then you would be in a group of knitters. I don't know if it's 15 or 20, I don't remember. And you would stay with that group for each day, and you'd rotate through these teachers. This particular retreat was announced, the first one that didn't require spinning. And at that time, I was not a spinner. I had no intention of becoming a spinner. But I thought, well, that sounds really nice. And my college roommate lives out in Seattle. It would be really fun to be able to go out there and see her for a few days and go to this retreat and be with other knitters. It just sounded really fun. So when I saw that, I signed up for it right away. Well, as I mentioned, you have to find a way to get from the airport to Port Ludlow, and there's various ways of getting there, but it's, you know, a matter of, it's not just taking the airport shuttle to the hotel. It's going to take a number of hours regardless. So I had to figure out how I wanted to get there, and then I wanted to share a room, you know, because that decreases the cost, the hotel cost, if you can share a room. And I didn't have anybody I was going with. So there was a Ravelry group where you could people could ask, you know, does anyone need a roommate, or how are you going to get there? Or I'm driving, does anyone need a ride? You know, that kind of thing. So there was a woman named Margaret who I don't know if I said I needed a room. I don't even remember. All I remember is that she contacted me and said, oh, I live 1 hour west of the Twin Cities. So I'm happy to even pick you up on the way to the airport. And she said she was renting a car, and if I didn't mind stopping at 5 or 6 yarn shops on the way to the retreat, I could ride in her car along with her. Like, do I want to do that? So I said yes, and then we agreed to share a room. We got everything booked up and stuff. So I didn't need her to take me to the airport, and I was going to stay with a friend before the retreat for a day, and then I was going to stay with my college roommate for several days afterwards. So I didn't need that part, but I was happy to get, you know, a ride in the car with her. So I met her at the airport car rental, got in the car with her, we introduced ourselves, and I started finding out more about her. I think I may have known that she had an alpaca farm, that she was an alpaca farmer. Ahead of time, she may have mentioned that. We got to know each other in the several long hours going from shop to shop and on our way up the retreat. The reason that she wanted to stop at these shops was because she was an independent yarn dyer. And she had been really kind of small. It was a real hobby business for her, in very small batches. She sold directly from her website and at 4 or 5 different festivals that are in the area, Wisconsin, Shepherd's Harvest here, Yarn Over. There's a few festivals that she was doing this with her mother. They've been doing it for like 14, 15 years, something like that. But that winter, she decided to expand it as a full, you know, wholesale business instead. So really ramp up her production rate and to sell directly to yarn shops. So that's what she wanted to do. These were going to be amongst the first yarn shops that she was even going to approach about taking her yarn. So she had this big suitcase full of yarn, and we go to one yarn shop after another. She'd be dragging the suitcase behind her. I would go wandering around the shop looking at things, and she would show them her yarn, and then we would go to the next shop. And at the retreat, everybody, they get like a swag bag type of thing. Everybody got a skein of her sock yarn in their swag bag. So that was my introduction to Margaret. I thought it was a really interesting person to meet, an alpaca farmer who's an independent dyer. So when I started doing Casual Friday videos, I don't know, a year and a half, almost 2 years now, I started thinking about what are all the different kinds of things that I could do that might be interesting. And I was, I would take a trip and I would, videotape some of the things that I would do on the trip. So I've done that before, but it's always just been me in my Casual Friday videos. But I'd been thinking from that very beginning that it might be interesting to go out to Margaret's farm and see her operation, because she had told me about the equipment. Her husband's an aerospace engineer, and the equipment that he had built for her in order to allow her to really ramp up her production, and it sounded fascinating to me. So I thought it would be fun to do that, and I have a friend that's a sheep farmer, and I talked to her a year ago about coming up to see her farm, and she agreed to it, and then both of our mothers got diagnosed with breast cancer at the same time. We're scheduled for surgery, and then it just never came back to it. So this year, I am on the planning committee for the Minnesota Knitters Guild Fall Retreat. We call it the Great Guild Getaway. And part of being on the planning committee is that we contact yarn shops and other yarn related businesses about potentially donating items to the swag bags that every registrant gets. Just like the bag that we got when Margaret and I went to the retreat, and she put her yarn in everybody's bag. So we were coming up with this list of yarn shops and wanted to make sure that there wasn't any, two people weren't going to be contacting the same shops. And so we're kind of dividing them up. And somebody mentioned a sheep farm or a mill or something like that in southern Minnesota. And I went, oh, wait a second, it doesn't have to be a yarn shop. I could see if Margaret might want to donate like a door prize or something like that. So I emailed her and I said, would you be interested in donating something? We have, prizes for bingo night, or we have door prizes, or little things that could be put in the swag bags if there's enough for all of the 50 people that would come to the retreat. And she said, absolutely, I will donate something. She said, my daughter-in-law is a designer, so we're going to put something together. We don't know what yet. I'll let you know, but absolutely, I'm on board for that. I said, great. So, a couple weeks went by, and so I just thought, I'm just going to follow up with her. And I said, did you guys figure out what you wanted to do? So I told her that rather than mailing whatever it was to the committee, that I would be happy to drive out there to her farm and pick it up. And I really, really would love to see her dye house if that was possible. I'd really love to see her alpaca farm. And she said that's no problem. She didn't have her livestock at her farm anymore, and that her livestock was mostly in Wisconsin. Her arthritis had gotten bad and her mother was getting older, so she's not maintaining her livestock on the farm anymore, but she certainly has her dye house open, and she's working on orders all the time, and I was welcome to come out. So that's what I did on Wednesday. I went out to Little Gidding Farm Surrey alpacas and met with Margaret. And so I did an interview with her. That's what's different about this video, is I've never had a guest on my video before. And then we toured her dye house, and I got to see her whole production system, from when she dyes things to then when she packages things up into skeins and all of that. So it's really interesting, and so that's what I'm going to show you next.
Your destination is on the left.
Margaret Long, is that correct?
That is correct.
And tell me the name of this place.
So the farm itself is called Little Gidding Farm, Surrey Alpacas. The yarn company is called LGF Suris Yarns, just to make it shorter.
Yeah.
We called it Little Gidding Farm after a poem by T.S. Eliot. It's actually one of a quartet of poems that we read at my sister's funeral about getting to the end of things and finding things anew. And that's what this was for us, for my mother and I.
Right, because that's why you started looking at alpacas. So, if I'm remembering correctly, that you have like a degree in fashion design or
I
something?
majored in fashion design at the university. Actually,
Yeah.
just design. I don't think we had focused down into fashion yet, but
Oh,
design
okay.
in general. And
Right.
my mother and I actually took a lot of courses together
Yeah.
in color and color therapy and
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
So you have this long background, and then were you a knitter all your life?
No.
No. When did you
Never
start
knew how to
knitting?
knit.
You didn't.
I didn't know how to knit until after I'd had alpacas for probably at least 3 years.
Oh well, what made you?
I was a seamstress.
Okay.
I've sewn all my, since I was
Okay.
9. I've been sewing, but my mother has been knitting since she's 5.
Okay.
And when we saw Surrey alpaca specifically, when we saw it dyed and how beautifully it took color,
Uh-huh.
that was it. And for me to begin with, it was just the color. Just,
Okay.
oh my goodness, the color.
And so did you start dyeing them right away? Like what did you
Oh,
do? Like
absolutely,
did
right
you
away.
just start acquiring alpaca fiber, or before you got the
No, we started with
alpaca-
the animals.
Started with the animals?
We looked at both Wakaya and Surrey. So the Wakaya are the fuzzy, Ewok-looking alpacas, and the Surrey are the long, silky ones. We fell in love with the Surrey because of their fiber, and because of it. It's like working with silk.
Uh-huh.
And we knew right away that we wanted to be small, we wanted to be focused, and we wanted to be able to dye our yarn. So therefore, no dark animals, no speckled animals, strictly white and light colored animals, so that we could then dye.
Okay. And so so at first you were just dyeing for yourselves, or were you had in mind a business of some sort?
No, I think we always intended to make a business out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. At first, the intention was only to be just a small niche,
Right.
indie yarn maker.
And
And we
then-
did that for a number of years, 16, I think, almost. 17.
Okay. And so what was your dye setup then? Was it like pots on a stove type of thing, or crock pots?
Actually,
or like,
first it was pots on a stove at my mother's house, and
Okay.
she lives in Hopkins. And then we graduated to turkey cookers. So first it was just one turkey cooker, and then I upped it again and went to 2 whole turkey cookers at a time.
how big is a turkey cooker? Like, what do you mean,
You can
like
do 6,
a roaster?
6 hanks, yeah, like a roaster.
Okay.
6 hanks of yarn at a time is what we
Okay.
could max out at.
Okay. And then, so in those early days, like, how many colors were you playing with? Dye mixtures and colors.
We
from the
had a
beginning?
great time doing that. We would. I remember one year we found a piece of artwork that we just absolutely loved. I think it was called the Peacock Room from a museum, and I honestly cannot tell you right now what museum that was. But we looked at the colors, going woo, and that year, the colors in our yarn line that we took to festivals, fiber festivals, were from that range of colors. And then like the next year we did one that was based strictly on flowers and things growing out in the garden.
So at that time you were just doing 6, skeins at a time in the whatever colors sparked you for that particular
Mm-hmm.
year. You weren't trying to replicate things year after year.
No, and not until we started having people fall in love with certain colors.
Okay.
And when that started to happen, then we started to try to do that. It's hard when you're doing very small batches to replicate a color.
Right.
Exactly. We did do a lot of calculations, and as I told you, my daughter created what we called the dye calculator, which is just an Excel spreadsheet that calculated by gram how much dye we needed for how much yarn, and we got much more accurate about being able to reproduce it. We've always used straight up powder dyes in 5 colors. We use a magenta, a red, a yellow, a blue, and a black. They each have their own very distinct
Okay.
personality, or at least that's how we like to refer to it. We refer to the red as the difficult red,
Oh, okay.
because it doesn't like to dissolve. It's very hard to dissolve. The yellow is slow. We call it the slow yellow because it takes forever to jump onto the yarn.
Okay.
So when I tell people, we've had some horrible colors. I mean, over the years, we have had some just unbelievably awful colors. And it's because you don't really know until you start putting that together what dye is going to jump onto the yarn first, second, third, and fourth. And now over the years, we've gotten much better at
Right.
it, and we have a much better sense of how.
So because they're not coming on all at the same time, and they're layering, and so
Exactly.
if something goes on first, you
And
lose.
it takes up too much space, then maybe that next
Oh,
color
'cause-
can't jump on because there's
'cause-
only so many places a dye cell can.
Yeah, because the yarn can only
Yep.
take in so much
Yep.
dye. So, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So do you have to do like dye in stages, maybe? Like add this color and then 20 minutes later add another? Or
no,
you don't do that? You
no,
just, you
we
just
have
figure
we
out.
have a recipe. So now we have 20 colors right now, and those recipes are pretty much set in stone. I have had requests for other colors, and I have come up with a couple of alternatives. And I've had yarn stores approach me on doing specific colors just for them, where they'll send me a Pantone or a picture of something they want to work off of, and I can come up
So
with colors that go with that.
custom colors,
Yep.
like when the shop hop here in town,
Exactly.
they have the independent
Exactly.
stuff.
What we do not do a lot of variegation, and we do not do any like speckles, just for a couple of reasons. One, when we started, my mother is a purist, and she's a yarn snob of the highest order. And so, first of all, the yarn, we had to figure out how to make good yarn, in her opinion, and that took a long time. And then we had to figure out how to dye solid, as much as possible, solid, even colors, or tone on tone.
Right.
Some variegation within the skein is okay, but basically we like to have solid,
yeah.
classical looking colors.
So when you talk about getting the yarn, so you use a local mill, right?
Right.
You
We use Rach alpaca fiber processing.
Okay, so they specialize
Down
in
in Hastings.
alpaca.
Correct.
Okay, in Hastings. Okay.
We've worked with them exclusively since the very beginning, and she's put up with our idiosyncrasies and my mother's super high demand for quality. And we've both learned a lot from each other over the years. Her as to, what we consider to be the excellence that we're looking for, and for us, what will ruin a yarn. We have ruined many batches of yarn. If you send fiber that is tender, if you don't check your fiber and it's tender and you send it to the mill, you will have yarn that sheds like nobody's business.
Okay.
So things like that we've just learned over the years.
So you blend your yarn. Are all of your yarns blended with another fiber, or some of
To
them
some
pure?
degree.
Okay.
No, even the lace and the ultimate, which are the two high-end ones, the LGF Suris Ultimate and the LGF Suris Lace are 90% Suris alpaca, grade 1, which means it's 19 microns or less, super fine, but it has 10% super fine targhee in it, because that helps to stabilize the yarn itself.
Okay.
Suris itself does not like to play well together.
Okay.
It does not want to stay together. It likes to slip and slide apart.
Okay.
Put a little bit of, just a tiny bit of yarn, of wool in there, and then they hold together.
Because alpaca doesn't have scales, right?
It has
Like
very
wool.
low, almost low.
Yeah,
almost
and that's why it can stretch, and then it won't. It doesn't have that elasticity where it will grow
Correct.
back, which makes it great for drape and
Correct.
things like that.
Correct.
But maybe not so
Which is
good
why
for
we say it's like a combination of silk and cashmere.
Yes.
It dyes like silk, and it has that luster of silk, but it does not. Yeah, correct. So, and we tell people that too. When you learn what patterns work well, what needles work well with the super Suris intense ones. We also have the other blends that we do. We do a DK that is a 40-60 with the same high-end, high luster wool. We do a 50-50, which is our sport. We do a sock. The sock yarn I tell everybody is actually one of the hardest ones to come up with the blend for.
Oh, really?
Partly because you have to find long staple wool that is tough. I mean, but it's not. We don't want it to be coarse or itchy.
Right.
So we needed to find the wool. Then we needed to find out how much wool to how much Suris, and then how much nylon to add to make it a durable yarn. It took us probably 10 years just to come up with that particular combination, and searching out the wools was one of the hardest things we did.
So when you are working with the mill and you're trying to develop a new yarn, you have and she's probably got some experience too with blending, and then so you have to figure out what the blend is, and then the preparation, and then the number of plies, and
We
how
do test batches. We would always do a 10-pound test batch before we would process in large
so
quantity.
10 pound, okay.
Right. So if someone approaches me and said, we want this kind of yarn for a special order, if a yarn company came to me and said, or a yarn store came to me and said, I want to do this, but I want it to. Someone asked me once, they said they wanted to do our sock yarn, but without the nylon in it, and I'm like, whoa, can't just jump in and do that. You have to go through the process and see if it's going to work, because otherwise you're cursed. And if you send 100 pounds of fiber to the mill and it all gets blended and mixed and it comes back and it's horrible, and we have done it. We have sent batches of yarn and we get it back and we can't sell it. Or we won't, I should say. I could, but I won't.
When you test and you get it back, then does your mom, who's very particular, does she knit something up with it?
We knit, we swatch, of course, we big
Yes,
swatchers.
yeah.
Not a lot of knitting, a lot of testing. We dye it because depending on what we do. We did one year, we tried some silk blend, and it took dye a very different way than it did when it didn't have silk in it. So all of that, everything you change makes a difference. So we knit it, we dye it, we see if it's balanced. Most of our yarns are 3-ply because we find that gives us a better balanced yarn than 4 or 5, whatever.
Yeah.
And Suris, and all alpaca, but Suris is what we deal with, but it's all a very dense fiber. It is not wool. It is alpaca, and so the more plies you add to it, I remember one of our first yarns ended up feeling like twine because we didn't know it was over twisted, it was over plied, and it was just horrible.
Oh, I'm learning with the spinning, you know, like sometimes you think, oh, I'm going to spin it this way, and it's fight with it, and then so you do something else. And well, that was a lot easier, but now I have to see if it's going to turn into a yarn that's any good.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of experimenting.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
When I met you, you were like we were going to this retreat, and you said, "Well, I'm renting a car, so if you don't mind stopping at 5 or 6
Yeah.
yarn shops on the way to the knitting retreat,
It would.
you know." I know.
Oh no.
So I think you were just new in expanding your
brand new.
business there. So
Those are
you've
some of
been
the first stores I ever went to.
Yeah, it's what I was remembering is that had you been to some of the Minnesota stores yet?
Yeah,
or-
I'd been to 3 Minnesota stores at that time,
Okay,
but
so
I
this
had
was
just
really new. So I remember you had a suitcase full of yarn, and you were going to these different places. That must have been scary, but so the plan was then just to go wholesale into the yarn shops, and before you had done like festivals and direct.
Correct. So we
direct?
had done festivals. We'd done Wisconsin Sheep and Wool, Yarn Over, Shepherd's Harvest. We had routinely
Just the
done
local-
up to 5 a year. My mom was getting on in years, and then she had some struggles with cancer and health and so forth. I had both my knees replaced. It got to be very hard.
Yeah.
And that's when my husband came up with this idea of, well, why don't you go wholesale?
Yeah.
And I said, well, how am I going to do that if
Yeah.
I'm only dyeing 6 skeins at a time in a turkey cooker?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to fill those orders. And so that first year when you met me was the year after. Literally the first spring after we had spent the winter building the dye house.
Okay.
And looking at doing a full scale operation. And at that time we were only taking the sock out there,
Okay.
only the sock yarn, and we weren't looking at the others at that time because we kind of wanted to test it, get our feet wet with the sock yarn, and
Yeah.
then see what the reaction
Okay.
was.
I remember getting my sock yarn at the retreat, and I knit it up right away, and then I gave away those socks. So,
aren't you silly?
and I remember that color too. I remember like, oh my God, there's this beautiful color, and I got this other beautiful color, but I really wanted that.
That one?
You traded
That's right.
it. Was that
It was
like
the blue.
cobalt blue?
Yeah, the indigo.
So beautiful. Oh, is that indigo?
Yeah.
Is that the name?
Yep.
Oh, so beautiful. And that was my friend's favorite color, which is
Oh,
why I
well,
did
that was nice.
So that winter that you're talking about, when your husband, so it was his idea for you to like just ramp it up?
Yeah,
and-
so he saw what was going on with the business, and he saw how much time we had spent developing the quality of the yarns. And then I also got laid off of my real job at the nursing home where I'd been working for 15 years. And he's like, well, then why don't you just go wholesale and just do yarn? And I looked at him like he was crazy, but he's an engineer, and engineers don't take no very well. When you say, well, that's a problem, all he sees is a way to find a solution. So we spent the winter looking at how's this going to work, and we had some very interesting conversations because he'd coming from a completely different approach to things. He knew nothing about fiber, knitting, yarn, any of that, except for what he'd heard me say. And I remember at one point, it was very late at night. This was one of the ones I was telling you about. It was 11 o'clock at night, and we'd been having conversations about all kinds of very esoteric things having to do with dyeing yarn. And he said, well, how much does a soaking wet skein of yarn weigh? And I was like, I have no idea. I looked over at him. I said, I suppose you want me to go soak a skein of yarn and weigh it for you? And he's, yes, please. And that was the night at which I said, okay, here's the deal. If we're going into business together, that's great. But after 9 o'clock, no more discussions about the business. My brain is now an overload.
Yeah, now you're going to be lying in bed
Especially
all night.
math.
Yeah, thinking about this.
He would ask me things like, how fast does the dye liquor need to move around the yarn? Or how fast do you stir the yarn when you have it in the turkey cooker and you're stirring it? I was like, fast? I have no idea.
So with alpaca, because it doesn't have the scales, it's not as big a risk of felting, is it? But still, there is some.
There's always some risk, absolutely. You can, so for instance, our ultimate is very hard to felt because it is 90%
Right.
Suri, and Suri is difficult to felt.
Right.
You actually have to work at it. You can felt our sock yarn if you put it through really hot water wash, that kind of thing. But you have to work at it. I have never had a problem with the dye setup that we have now, and I've never had a problem with stirring yarn in a turkey cooker. Never had a felting problem, even with my high wool blends.
Okay.
Just because you're not causing enough agitation for that to happen. So
Okay. And now your animals, you said, are in Wisconsin now, right?
they're actually in Wisconsin and Missouri.
Oh, okay.
So
So the alpaca that you use in your yarns, is it only from your alpacas, or is all of your alpaca yarn going into your yarn, but you have to source other alpaca too?
that's correct.
Okay.
So our herd, the majority of our herd is in Wisconsin, and then a few of them are also down in Missouri. The woman down in Missouri, Salt River Mills, she owns North American alpaca. She collects alpaca, Surrey alpaca only. She doesn't do Acacia. She collects Surrey fleece from across the country from many, many, many different farms. And she knows what we're looking for. And so she will call me and say, I have this many pounds of this grade in this color, and tell me what you need. And she'll ship it to me. And then I'll also collect the clip from Wisconsin and combine them. My mom and I still to this day go through every single fleece by hand ourselves.
So I think that we are ready to go into the dye house. So you just turn this on with your phone, huh? Oops, let me get this. That's pretty cool. And did your husband design that app, or did he adapt something?
He adapted from a brewing app.
A brewing app, okay.
A winemaking app.
Okay, winemaking, because I know that
So this
like,
is- yeah.
this is, let's,
So normally this would not have that inside of it.
it would not have the little fountain that we've got
All of
down
that
in
had to be
there.
adapted and plumbed in.
And how many gallons is this?
76,
76.
75.
70, okay. And how, and so you have that much water in it?
It will, yeah. It'll be up to here, which is the highest level.
got-
This would be what I call a wash tank. So I'm going to raise this up. This has been soaking for several hours.
Oh, and then that's all.
It's all raw yarn the way it comes to me from the mill. I'm going to open the grain on that.
Okay, so this is raw, and you got a little bug here on one of these.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no keeping real life out of it.
Yeah.
There's real hay and there's some bugs, and all of that comes out eventually by the time I get it dyed, washed, rinsed,
And which kind of yarn is this? Is your sock yarn?
Nope, this is our LGF Targhee Ultimate.
Targhee Ultimate.
So
what?
it is 80% Targhee, grade 1 Targhee, 19 microns or less, and 20% Surrey.
Okay.
Grade
And
one
what
Surrey.
kind of weight? Like a
Fingering weight.
Fingering weight. Okay.
So then if this is the end of the process, it would come out of the dye tank, it would go in here and wash, and then rinse, and then rinse again. And the final rinse, I put a little white vinegar just to balance back out after the acid. And then after that, it goes into...
Can I show these colors or not? Okay.
It goes into the spin dryer, so when I take it off of the
Oh,
rack,
you have a spin dryer thingy. Okay.
I'll take up to like maybe 10 skeins, put it on here. This is my creation, by the way.
Okay.
And this goes like this, and that goes into the spin dryer, spins out, then it comes back out, and it goes onto the drying racks.
And these are the drying racks?
These are the drying
Okay,
racks.
so it comes out of here,
And then,
and you do like 10 of them, and you put them in the
and then
spinner.
they get put on here to dry.
And how long does it take them to dry? Probably depends on the humidity.
Depends a lot on what
Well,
time of year.
yeah, like winter, it's dry, but it's cold.
Exactly. So, but these rods are all super portable, so then they can go up to the skeining room.
Oh,
or the
okay.
Still skin room. We'll carry them up by rod. My husband will carry 5, I'll carry
Okay.
3, whatever, and carry them up there. They can finish drying up there.
Okay.
Where the air is dry.
Yeah.
And then when I finish filling this, I fill it with mostly cool water. I'll add a little warm water towards the end just to get it to about where I want it, which is somewhere between 85 and 90 degrees. I can tell all that on my phone. What temperature it is. While I'm waiting for that to happen, I'm going to get some boiling water. And then I'll check to make sure it's really dissolved. Yes, I always have colored fingers.
Oh, is that your acid?
This is my acid.
But you don't add that yet, right? You're just
The
mixing.
water's hot. I get this ready because we'll come back up half an
Well, that's a
hour.
handy level.
Isn't it?
Like you don't have a way up here and.
Got it from a doctor's office.
Oh, interesting.
They
Yeah.
were remodeling.
So is this seasonal for you, or does it just vary based on customers
It
asking?
really varies based on customer. I spent the first I spent the first 3 years doing a lot of touring myself, going and literally driving to yarn stores and showing my yarns or flying. During that time, I also spent a lot of time building up my inventory. So right now, my inventory is huge. I could supply pretty much any order.
Except a custom one, because
Yeah. The custom order, I had the yarn.
Okay.
I just had it done.
Oh, because you have to have the yarn milled. You have to have that. Okay.
And that alone is a 4-month wait right now. At least. Assuming you have the raw fiber on hand, which is not always the case, particularly with like the Suri Ultimate. Right now, I'm just reaching in to find my my vacant space in the middle. So I'm gonna lower this down. And I'm kind of use my fingers to feel where the fountain is.
Oh, yeah, because it's below the level now.
Then we have these.
And then, again, this is like just barely room temperature, if that, right?
Correct. And I like to do it that way because you get a much more even dye job if you start with cold and let it take up slow.
And then everything has a chance to be in there equally.
And it is now not being held up at all. It's resting on these guys. And I make sure that it's level. And everybody's where they need to be. Right. The reason that we do that is there are feet on the bottom of this. The bottom
to
part
keep
of the rack.
things from laying on there.
Right. What I also don't want, not only do I not want them lying on the bottom, but I also don't want them stretched the entire dye process.
Right.
So they kind of need to be
Relaxed.
loose and floaty. Yep. And in fact, when it gets to a certain temperature, I think about 120 degrees, you'll see them, they'll start to float up. I mean, you may not be, they will start to literally float up to the top of the dye batch. And that's as it should be. And then when I come back out and put the acid in, I insulate the top as well. This has insulation all the way around it. So it'll get quite sauna-like.
So, so this is going to, what is the temperature this is going to get up to? Did you say 180?
So it cycles, you can show the pipes and
Okay.
stuff. It cycles through the pipes, through a heater, which is the silver tube down there, through the pump and back in again, and it brings it up to 185 degrees.
Okay.
Holds it at that temperature for 2 hours, and then cools it down. The whole process from cold back down to room temperature again probably takes 12 hours.
So do you even need to come back here again during this process?
I come back in half an hour to put the acid in.
Oh, okay.
The reason I do that is because, again, if you want a super even dye, what you want to do is let some of the dye jump on slowly without any acid. As soon as you put in the acid, you speed up the entire process.
Okay.
And so I give it half an hour to kind of do its thing, and then I come back out and raise the whole rack up, pour the acid in, let the acid cycle a little bit, put the yarn back in. And it'll be kind of a pastier version of itself. It's going to be that persimmon color.
Oh, and it looks so pink in here when, in here now.
With the light, yeah. It's going to be that persimmon color. When we come out and look at it, when we put the acid in, it'll be that pale. Because it's not until the acid comes in that everything starts to actually latch on.
And you were saying the yellow takes longer.
Takes much longer.
Too, so.
You'll come, if I came out here like this evening at 9 o'clock tonight, the water will still be yellow and the yarn will look like it's going to be pink and you're like, oh no.
Oh.
And you have to say, it's okay. The yellow will get there. It just takes a long time.
So even as it's cooling down, the yellow is still getting, interesting.
Absolutely.
So because like when you're doing it at home, they always tell you wait until it's exhausted and then turn the heat off.
Right.
But,
And that is true to some extent. If it's clear, you've exhausted it. It's not going to take up any more. But if it still looks yellow, you can let it cool all the way down to cool, and it will still continue to take up yellow.
Oh, interesting.
And it's just because of that particular dye.
Okay.
So, and our dyes come from
Does it say on there?
Pro Chemical and Dye.
Chemical and dye. And like, do you just buy it directly from them?
Yep.
Or okay.
Yeah, and they're super helpful people. They're super wonderful.
And do they
do
only
have-
sell in like this type of bucket?
No, they sell them in small little jars too.
Okay.
I just
Because I've only looked at like Dharma Trading or like they sell the
they
little.
have pre-mixed colors as well, but we just knew we wanted the control that we
Right.
have with.
Well,
you know,
that
mix our own
seems more
colors.
interesting to me as to doing the
So much
mixing.
fun. Yeah. If we want to make up a new color, what we do is we use the 1% dye solutions, and we'll literally take 10 cc's of one and 5 cc's of another and put them in a little thing and stir it with a spoon and maybe drop it onto a paper towel. Not even dye yarn necessarily, but it gives you an idea of where you're going. We've done so many colors now that somebody asked me for a deeper blue. Well, I can start from
what you already
my
have.
deepest blue and go deeper if I need, or something like that. So for most of my dyeing now, I can start from one of my previous colors. But if I wanted to make it a totally new color, like I wanted to make a new color called gingerbread, which I did last.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I'm like, because browns are hard.
Yeah.
And it was literally, it took my mom and I probably 4 different tests before we're like, yeah, that's the one. I didn't want baby poop brown. I didn't want, you know.
You wanted to have that kind
I
of.
didn't want barn brown. I wanted it
reddish.
the reddish.
Yeah,
exactly. And it was how much red. And was it magenta or red?
Oh,
which one? Because
yeah.
they're different. And they behave very differently. So that was, that's what we do. We start back at the basics with small amounts and just play. And that was one of the things we always loved doing together.
And again, you were saying you use blue, not cyan, or do you
we
use
use straight up blue?
You use blue, yellow, magenta, red, and black. Mm-hmm. Those are interesting. Mm-hmm. So the next thing, you said half an hour, and then you put the citric acid in, and then it cooks for a couple more hours. Is that what?
Oh, this will go till tomorrow. I mean, I won't do anything after that. I put the acid
But doesn't the heat get turned off, or no?
Oh, it does that all by itself.
Okay, but when does it do that? A couple hours? 4 hours?
At least 4 hours.
Okay.
Well, no, it'll probably take 3 to 4 hours to get that many gallons up to 185.
Okay.
And then it'll stay there for 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
And then it'll cool down.
And then it'll cool. And when you put the citric acid in is when you put the insulating in, and then you don't really need to come out here again after that.
I do.
Yeah, I know. Come back out. Can I get you anything? So then really it's until tomorrow morning, and then you raise that rack up again, and then it goes in the wash. Rinse. How long does it wash for?
Just a couple of minutes.
And then you take it out and move it to the rinse. So you have all the tubs set up ahead of time when you Yep.
I start filling, as soon as I raise this rack, I'll start pumping it out of the dye tank into those tanks.
So how much do each of those tanks hold?
I think those are 25.
So that you can use this entire tank to fill these 3?
Oh yeah, and then I add some other water.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We used to wash all our fiber ourselves. We would send it to the mill already clean.
Oh. That's
so we did a lot
work.
of what they call scouring, which is what the mills call it, scouring. And we did in those 2 sinks right over there. And I used to have a wrangler, a mangle.
Oh.
And we would run our fleece through the mangle. And it is a huge amount of work. And the only thing we ever used was tide. And man, did it get the dirt out. But here's a little tip. You're washing your sweaters.
Oh,
or
little
just
conditioner.
Washing yarn. On the last rinse, when I put the vinegar in, I put a little hair conditioner. Because your hair is protein.
Yeah.
My fiber is protein. Little bit of conditioner.
Once the yarn has been dyed, washed, rinsed again, spun dry, and then dried on the rack, it's brought up to the skeining room. And this is where Margaret does her quality control. She handles every single skein herself and rewinds it into the size skein that is appropriate for whichever type of yarn it is. She has this double vertical swift where she puts 2 of the hanks on the swift. She gets them all straightened out and adjusted, and she winds several yards of yarn off just to make sure everything is straight and that it's coming off of the swift smoothly. So she will do this for each of the 2 skeins. Then she'll wind it back onto the swift, and then she'll thread it through some holes at the base of the swift, and then attach them, both of the skeins, to the double skein winder, which is motorized. And that has a meter on it that can measure how many yards are going on to the winder. So the ball winder, or the skein winder, is winding at an even rate. So the 2 skeins are winding onto the skein winder at the same rate, but it's possible that the 2 hanks of yarn could be coming off of the vertical swift at different rates if yarn is catching or something. So it's really important to get the speed of the skein winder correct so it's not going too fast. Because if it's going too fast, then if anything catches as it's coming off the the Swift, it'll just snap the yarn, and then you've wasted the yarn, because she's got a 300-yard skein and she needs to make 3 100-yard skeins that don't have knots in them. The skein winder can be set so that you can create whatever circumference skein she wants. So for the 100-yard skeins, she wants a 1-yard circumference. She actually has 2 sets of these. She's got 2 double vertical Swifts and 2 motorized double skein winders in her set. So she'll get one of them set up, and while that one is winding off, then she gets the other one set up. Once she's got her 100 yards wound onto the skein winder, she stops it, she cuts the yarn, and then she ties it off. For the mini skeins, she just has a single tie off, and she uses the yarn, the 2 ends of the skein of yarn, to do that tie off. She said her mother's really particular about how these things are tied off, and for the full-size skeins, she would always have 4 tie-offs, and every one of those tie-offs would use the ends of the yarn. There was no extra little cotton yarn or twine used to create figure 8s elsewhere in the skein. So once they're off, she brings it over to the wall where her husband has created another machine that will wind the skein for her, and then she just pops the 2 ends together, ta-da, and then she's got them done. Is that the indigo?
This is the sock.
Ah.
So when I put the tag on, that's the way, so it would have 4 ties and a tag. And then I would take a full skein over here.
Look at that, how pretty. So pretty.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, thank you. Now I can have a pair for myself. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. Let me know if you enjoyed this field trip interview that I did with Margaret, because I do have some ideas for other things that I might do in the future, and I'd love to share it with you if that's something that you're interested in. Next week, we'll get back to my knitting and spinning progress, but that's it for this week. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.